Hello, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group. That's a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Thank you to Pew Research Center for making today's conversation possible, as well as to our good friends at Village Square for coming alongside us in this work. And speaking of coming alongside us in this work, one of my colleagues from the Democracy Group is with us today, and that is Dr. Stephanie Wilson. Stephanie Wilson is a historian, activist, and communications expert who writes, produces, and hosts the Freedom Over Fascism podcast. That's where Stephanie talks to authors, experts, activists, historians, journalists who discuss fact-based media and strategies to break through the miasma of I love that. I'm going to work that into my vocabulary now. Miasma of right-wing lies and provide fact-based quality news and information. I didn't know there was a need for that, Stephanie. How you doing?
Hey Corey, thank you so much for having me on. I think this will be really fun for
Yeah.
everybody out there. Corey lives right next door to where I grew up, and now I'm 3,000 miles away on the other side of the country. So
How'd that happen? So I grew up on that coast, you grew up on this coast, and then we kind of switched places at a certain
yeah,
point. Was it
yeah,
Brandeis? Was that when you moved East Coast?
yeah. I started grad school in 1999, and totally given myself away here, but I've been here ever since. So that
Hmm.
what makes 27 years. Yeah.
And you did some serious work at Brandeis. I mean, there are all kinds of, organizations that you were heading up and all kinds of serious work that you were doing there. So I have a lot of questions about like why you decided to go back to school, but you know what? Let me rewind a little bit further because I was
Yeah.
curious first about your years at Claremont McKenna.
Hmm.
You majored not
You
just
did
in
your research. Wow.
I try. Um, you majored not just in history but Jewish Israel studies. What drew you to that focus at a relatively young age?
Well, so back in the day, and I'm sure it still exists, Claremont McKenna, uh, being a small liberal arts college, allowed you to create your own major if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
And I had um, so I went to Israel when I was 17. And then I ended up taking, a variety of both Jewish studies and Middle Eastern studies. So I realized I had almost enough for a major.
Wow.
So I just kind of mushed it together and proposed it as a major, and that's what it became.
Yeah, yeah.
So it wasn't intentional at the beginning. I was just a history major for a long time, and then I realized I could make a double major as opposed to a dual major, which is something that Claremont McKenna does. So
So this is sort of technical, not I don't know, in the weeds a little bit, but did you learn to speak Hebrew growing up, or did you learn it in college, graduate school? Like,
I was in Hebrew school, which you learn absolutely nothing in. And then when I went to Israel when I was 17, they gave us lessons every day, and I didn't really learn anything there. And then
wait, you know what's funny is that the only part of the Jewish alphabet that I remember is the letters that the classes that I was in went up to. So Aleph, Bet,
right.
Gimel, Dalet, Hey. I don't know what comes after Hey because I didn't, those are the grades that we were in Hebrew
Yeah,
school.
yeah, yeah. I hear you. So after actually, so I had all sorts of Hebrew instruction. None of it stuck. I went to Jerusalem for my junior year abroad. Had classes, didn't really stick. And then uh, after I graduated from CMC, I moved to San Francisco and was in the corporate world,
Oh,
which did not work out. I mean, I was doing public relations and public affairs, and that was sucking my soul away.
but
So I
but you
decided,
must have gotten a really, for lack of a better word, just a really good professional education, like a vocational education, doing that corporate work, right?
oh, totally. I started off uh, in high tech PR in the what was it, mid 90s.
Yeah.
So I was doing fairly high level things. I remember on my 24th birthday, um, I said something to a client about it being my birthday, and they're like, "Well, how old are you?" And I thought, "Oh, this is not going to go well." And I was just like, "I'm not going to answer that. Are you kidding
Yeah.
me?" And then my boss, who started the company when he was like 26, said, "Yeah, I turned 32 about 6 years in a row."
That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, so one of my early experiences, I shared this before. I was a stockbroker. I got licensed actually before I was even 21. But so in my early 20s on Wall Street, talk about sucking one's soul. I literally had a heart condition and an ulcer by the time I was 21. But it did teach me something about business, how the prices of stocks actually move.
hmm
It taught me how to read a prospectus. I learned albeit from like, as opposed to like a highfalutin, really academic. It was more like if cavemen were running businesses,
Yeah,
that would be
totally.
Wall Street.
Yeah,
But I did learn a lot. It was a good foundation that I've drawn upon, throughout. Thank God I've survived, that
right.
that experience. But it did teach me a lot. So I would
Yeah.
imagine that experience. So,
Oh,
so
absolutely. Yeah, that was foundational for understanding what that, much later became political communications. Uh, I did a lot of international work when I was at Brandeis. So what I learned in my early years of my career turned out to be incredibly thoughtful. It's just when I
yeah.
was, had clients like Chevron and
Oh yeah.
I was like, I can't do this, can't do this anymore. So,
So is that part of what prompted you to really think through your life's direction and you going back to grad school and all that?
yep, I called it my quarter life crisis before John Mayer did. Um, yeah, I couldn't keep it up. The stress level was so hard, and no one ever told me that your 20s suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the 20s are where you like learn to be an adult and you live on your own and you have fun and then you get into these really high pressure careers
Yeah.
and it's really really hard to handle. And yeah, so I was like, I can't keep doing this. I like the actual work of it, but if I'm not doing it for a cause I believe in, this isn't gonna work out for me long term.
Yeah.
So,
So
uh,
so I want to talk about your dissertation. So I have a bone to pick with you.
yeah.
It's too good and too thick because I couldn't. So actually my confession is that I didn't get through it, but there's
Of
a good
course you
reason.
didn't,
No,
because
no, no, no. There's a really good reason for that. Is because there were so many references on every page. Do you pronounce the sociologist's name Albavox? Is that how you say it? One of
which
the
one?
one of the sociologists that you cite, it's not spelled that way. I think the first it's Halbwac.
Halbox. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. It's just a sociologist I read, so I never actually
So that's just an
learned that
example.
properly.
I stopped and I looked. I ended up reading a bunch of his essays. Based on So the reason I didn't get through it is because I was reading a lot of the source material that you were citing. It was really, really edifying and really rich. But I did want to ask you some things about that. In recent years, so the dissertation about the establishment of the Tower of David Museum. I know I'm way oversimplifying here, but um, in recent years has the Tower of David Museum been able to, as you say, lay claim to Jerusalem and emphasize the link between present Israeli rulers and ancient Jewish sovereigns in the face of ongoing political conflict in the city? When you wrote that, it was very different. I mean, there's still a lot going on, obviously, but once October 7th happened, I think that changed the game quite a bit, didn't it?
Well, yes, but I think the game was changed a lot earlier than that. So to go back, my dissertation is looking at a museum that's in the old city of Jerusalem, how it was created and by whom, to figure out what the founders' uh, political interests were, because all museums and historical memory are generally more about the people telling the story than the story itself. So I wanted to look at the story they were telling about the history of Jerusalem, which started um, in the Bronze Age and went up to, I don't remember when it went up
So
to,
eighty
67 maybe.
67, yeah, because that's when they first started planning the foundation of
Right,
the museum, right?
right. So I wanted to know about the people who created it just as much as I wanted to understand the history of Jerusalem. So I was writing it in the early 2000s. The museum itself was opened in 1989. So um, there was like a 10 to 15 year period where it had been going before I started researching it.
Mm,
And uh, my contention when I started is that people designed this museum to to communicate their values at a
yeah,
particular point in time in history. And, that was a time where uh, there was a lot of rhetoric about coexistence and sharing Jerusalem, but um, it hadn't the situation with Palestinians. It was after the first Intifada and basically during up to the second. I mean, I was there doing my research during the second Intifada. And so I was really interested in why and how and by what methods did these particular people at this particular time create a museum in a historical structure that was supposed to tell the entire story of Jerusalem. And one of their goals was to make the link between Jews and Jerusalem.
mm.
But there's a problem a little bit with that because before 70 CE, Jews
So
were sovereign for
the
various
destruction of the
pieces of
temple,
time.
the destruction of the second temple,
Right.
70, yeah,
So it was a war between Rome and Judea,
yeah,
uh, and um, and Rome in the end won and destroyed all of Jerusalem, kicked out the Jews entirely, and so Jews were forbidden from Jerusalem through the Roman time, through the Byzantine time, and didn't weren't not allowed to return until the Muslim conquest in the first Muslim conquest in the eighth century.
Can I?
So there had to be a really um, intentional connection from the ancient past to more modern times.
Yeah,
So then between the Muslim conquest and the Crusades, it was, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. But then during the Crusades, the Christians kicked out the Jews and the Muslims.
yeah.
And it wasn't until another Muslim invasion in the 13th century that Muslims and Jews were allowed to come back. So there were periods of time when Jerusalem was either run by the Romans and later the Byzantines, Christians, or actually it was the Christians that kept everybody out. The Muslims were a little bit more okay with having uh, Jews in Jerusalem and Christians in Jerusalem.
Now, would I be wrong to have the impression that Jewish people, unlike other people groups and nations that lay claim to that land, that we Jews are at the very least okay with pluralism, if not trying to build on the project of pluralism? Or is that the wrong impression that I'm? Because like if you look at I'm obviously very familiar with American Christianity, and I am always ill at ease when my friends from church talk about their love for Jerusalem because they feel more like the inherit. You talked about Rome; they feel like more like the inheritors of the Roman conquest than what when we think of Israel, of that part of the world. Is this just like a wrong, ill-founded impression, or am I onto
Well,
something?
it's really complex because um, Israel gave a lot of lip service to pluralism when it became a state. There's a
Yeah,
Declaration of Independence that says we welcome all the people, blah, blah, blah. But then they, the Israeli government held the population, the Palestinian population within Israel under military rule until just before 1967. So from
mm,
1948 until 67. So
yeah,
that was a little bit of a, you know, talk the talk, not so much walking the walk.
right.
Um, in terms of Christianity, the whole I bet most people don't know that the biggest supporters of Israel in the United States and the biggest funders of Israel in the United States are evangelical Christians.
Yeah.
And that's because they believe that during the rapture, um, they all get the Messiah comes back. They get to go to Jerusalem. All the Jews and everyone else die, and they get to inherit the heaven or whatever. I'm not totally sure what the rapture is, but that's I'm
Neither am
sorry,
I.
like my Christian theology is a little iffy, but so evangelical, a lot of people, will talk about AIPAC or American Jews being, this is an entirely different conversation about Israel and what's gone on after October 7th. But the reality is that it is Christians in America who give the most funding and support the right-wing government of Israel the most in America.
Hmm. Um, okay. So
But then the Rome thing is an entirely different thing. I have many multiple theories that I will not get into about Rome and Christianity uh, and how that sort of worked itself out. But that's
so
too much for now.
d- I don't know if I'm asking a question out of school here, but do you have ha, has your ambivalence increased since October 7th, specifically in the way that Netanyahu's government has waged the war?
Well, okay. I started off with the trip I went when I was 17, and it was, an indoctrination trip, and they do that really freaking well. They take you to like all the historical sites and show you like where this in the Bible happened and that in the Bible happened
Yeah.
and that was great. And for 17, for a 17-year-old, fine. Later on, between the time that I stopped working in San Francisco and the time that I went to graduate school, I went to Israel. That's when I actually learned to speak Hebrew. And I got involved in some NGOs that worked with Palestinians. And that's when I realized that the Israeli government, whichever Israeli government it was, um, uh, the occupation was really an occupation, and that the what Jewish Israelis saw as their right, um, what the rights that they had, they did not extend to Palestinians in the West Bank or Gaza.
Mm.
I didn't never went to Gaza. I spent a bunch of time in the West Bank and obviously a lot of time in Jerusalem. So I have been a proponent of equal rights for a very long time. My friends used to, kind of call me loony lefty, but um, which isn't to say I didn't have friends all over the political spectrum, but I also, had friends who were Palestinians. So I never really thought that Israel was doing uh, right
Yeah. Yeah.
by either Palestinians in Israel or the Palestinians under occupation.
Now, I have a lot of other questions about the work that you're doing now with Freedom Over Fascism, but one other thing that really got me thinking, um, I mentioned Maurice Halbavax or Albivax, something like that.
Yeah,
Forgive me for not having the right pronunciation.
I don't have it either.
But you referred to one of his essays, the collective memory, or it might have been a collection of essays, actually. Collective memory, shared identity, and common destiny. The way you described it, collective memory provides an image of the past that allows a group to recognize itself through the total succession of images. This, so, this actually, not only did I do a solo episode, because it really got me thinking about this, and I was doing a lot of other thinking and reading on this very topic. But part of our problem, and I think this is part of your bigger project, is that we we place ourselves in stories or we identify with groups or figures throughout history, often wrongly.
Yes.
So it's if we're talking biblically, it's natural for us to, when we're reading a story about how, you know, Nathan the prophet was, exhorting King David, we identify with Nathan, or we identify with any one of the other prophets who were exhorting the nation of Israel. And as opposed to like being the people of Israel who were gone astray. Or if we're looking at it from an American history perspective, of course we would be with the abolitionists. Of course we would be with the civil rights workers. But I think there's a danger there because in what ways are we the ones throwing the bomb onto the bus in Anniston, Alabama? In
Yeah.
what
Well, I think
ways?
that that's
Yeah.
something I think about a lot right now. Um, and one of the pieces is that, okay, I live in Lexington, Massachusetts, which means that every year, in the third Monday in April, we have Patriots Day, which is a commemoration of the Battle of Lexington,
Mm,
where the local Minutemen stood up to the British regulars, got their ass kicked. Then the regulars went on to Concord. They got their ass kicked and they came back through. And so
I'm
we are
imagining you,
meant.
by the way, at like Harvard or Yale teaching this class, and they got their ass kicked, and I love it. I want to be in that class.
um, so so we're meant to put ourselves in the place of these colonists.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. It turns out that the revolution for a long time was a civil war because
Yes.
a lot of people were loyal to the crown.
Right.
Um, and there were colonists who were not. Likewise, when we think about the past, and especially under the Trump regime, we are told to believe that enslaved people were fine with being enslaved, and that's part of the narrative of the lost cause, which
Right.
came after Reconstruction, basically the beginning of the 20th century, with films like Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind. With the idea is that the Southern that slavery was not part of the Civil War, and the slaves were really happy, and the Southern people were these gallant people who were done wrong and who were fighting for a cause of chivalry and this you know civilization that is just not accurate, but
Yeah.
had become a really big narrative device. And we are still dealing with those sorts of narrative devices as we think about um, American history and what was being, for instance, a lot of people talk about Thomas Jefferson and his mistress, Sally Hemings. He probably, first of all, she was his wife's half sister.
Mm,
So his wife's father raped
a
her.
slave. Yeah.
So when we think about slave owners having a mistress that is Jefferson started raping her when she was probably 14.
Wow.
And that was not, it could not be a consensual relationship. And a lot of times we don't really think about it in those sorts of terms because we don't want to. It's
Right.
really hard. And so, for African Americans, the whole idea that um, for them, everything that came after was part of what came before. And I think a lot of white Americans, particularly white Christian Americans, um, kind of try to swipe that slate clean.
Yeah.
The Civil War wasn't about slavery and everything was fine afterwards, and the civil rights made everybody equal. And by Reagan was a colorblind society, and none of that is true. Um, it's in the lived experience of different groups of people, you see how history affects the way people feel and react and understand their own history and everybody else's differently. Does
You
that make
know,
sense?
it does. It does. I don't know if this will make sense, but you reminded me of a conversation I had with a historian, African American scholar, and we were looking at a painting, like a rendition of a moment in time that depicted slaves, American South, and the scholar said there is something to be taken from this piece of artwork, but it's fundamentally wrong. And I wasn't sure what he was referring to. And he said, they're wearing shoes. It's the
Right.
shoes. So even in subtle way, the point was, even in subtle ways, we're sort of softening the
Yes.
what was happening there. Even by putting shoes on the figures in that painting, we're not reckoning with what the life was. So, I mean, I have tons of questions about this, but I do want to ask you about your work now. At
Mhm.
what point did you evolved your Substack, because originally it was Who's Your Victory Alliance, right?
Okay, yeah. Well, it was called What the Gerrymander. Uh,
I love
so
it.
in 2020, I worked on a social media project that was like a parallel campaign to Biden's called the Biden Digital Coalition. And I was the Facebook head, the head of the Facebook group. And one of the people on my team was a woman who moved to Indiana from Massachusetts early in the pandemic. And at that point, I I was a web designer and graphic designer, created logos and websites. And she called and hired me to do a couple different websites. And as we got closer, she wanted to create a nonprofit to help Indiana Democrats, make more progress. And so I worked on that with her, and I ended up doing communications for a candidate for the Indiana State House in 22. And she didn't win. She was a great candidate. Um, and afterwards, we sort of put together this podcast so that she could keep her profile up. And we were going to talk about red state politics, but she wasn't so interested in it.
Hmm.
And then I just sort of took it more in the direction that I was interested,
Yeah.
and at some point nationalized it a little bit more. Um, and you know, I'm always interested, since obviously the dissertation, on how the words we speak
Yeah.
uh, affect the people that hear them if we manage to get them to hear them.
Okay.
So one of my heroes is Anat Shenker Osorio. She is a messaging expert. I've had her on twice. And when she was on my uh, podcast first, she said something about, we have to talk about freedom and freedom over fascism and freedom, like you put the whole thing in a frame of freedom
Yeah.
for America. And I was like, freedom over fascism, that sounds really good. So that's when I decided, okay, well, if I'm going to talk about how do we talk about things,
Yeah.
and if I'm going to really talk about what I think is going on in America right now, I need to be framing it in a way that is accurate in my understanding. So that's when I changed it to freedom over fascism.
So I think you ask this in people that you're coaching in terms of communications. What do you want to achieve, right? So with freedom
Mhm.
over fascism, what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, I think in some cases it's shifted over time. Before uh, the 2024 election. So, what do I want to achieve? I want to help people who align with our values, pro democracy, pro freedom, to have the language to talk about this, whether they are, live in red states, wherever they live, um, to give them ways that they can focus their activism to help them understand the context of the world we live in. And then and so before what Trump was reelected, a lot of that was trying to help people understand that the corporate media was focusing way too much on the odds and not enough on the stakes of the
Mm,
election. So I wanted to start talking about independent journalism because the corporate media was really, in my opinion, falling down on the job. Like they like to talk about, well, is Trump going to win here or whatever? But the real reality is what's going to happen if Trump wins the election.
yeah.
Um, so I took it as one of the things I wanted to do is to explore that and explore ways to um, for activists to work for freedom, because it's important to understand that we need to talk about what we're for as
Yeah.
opposed to just what we're against. So the idea was to, get people to start using the language of freedom, give them ways to work toward it, and help them understand how culture and values and language intersected to understand what was going on in the country right now, and then
Okay.
how to make sense of it.
So this makes a lot of sense in terms of what you're diagnosing. There's a lot of different symptoms that we're all experiencing as part of a larger societal disease, if you will. So these conversations that you're having are doing a number of things at once. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misreading it. But one is simply to inform people, to point your listeners and your viewers and the community that you've built in the right direction. Because one of the problems that you've diagnosed is that there's a lot of folks who are completely misinformed. As you just said, media outlets are falling down on the job, or there are some media ecosystems that they don't even recognize the job as the job, that they recognize some other job as creating false narratives, right?
Right.
I don't know if you'd put it exactly that way, but I've
Yeah.
heard you say something similar. So that's part of it. But also part of it is the fascism, the reality of fascism. I
Yeah.
think you were more ready to use that word a lot sooner than some others. Like John Roush just had. Did you read his piece, by the way? It just came out about 3 or 4 days ago in the Atlantic. So,
I did not.
okay, so definitely worth the read. But I did want to ask you about this. Roush was hesitant to use what he referred to as the F word,
Hmm.
but whether Monday or Sunday, his piece came out in the Atlantic. 18 different concrete ways that we have moved in the direction of fascism.
Yeah.
That this administration is taking fascistic steps, if you will. But you came to that conclusion a lot earlier, and by having these conversations, the conversations themselves are sort of a rhetorical weaponry against fascism. Am
Hmm.
I reading too much into all of this?
No, that's entirely the point. As well as looking at, so I was one of the first to really name it and use it. Um, everyone was afraid to say it. What does fascism really mean? And at one point, an essay I did was, okay, let's look at the definitions of
Yeah.
fascism.
Yeah.
And okay, violence by the state and um, stifling of dissent and all of these things. And I was like, well, it looks like that's, really what at that point, uh, Trump had his first term and was running for the second term, but certainly in the red states, they were already doing this. So I live in a blue state, you don't live in a blue state, but having worked in one of the red states, you could see how they had gerrymandered their way into constant majority or supermajority
Yeah.
and were imposing their will on the citizenry despite whatever the citizenry wanted. So yeah, I was one of the first to use it because I I thought it fit and I still think it fits.
Mm. Yeah, and it's fair to take a look at it. John points out, that there's different iterations of fascism. Even first half of the 20th century,
Mhm.
Mussolini's fascism was slightly different than Hitler's. Franco's was slightly different than Mussolini's. So you could look at, but there are common threads. And just to give you a teaser, territorial and military aggression, attacks on the news media, undermining elections, police state tactics, dehumanization. Like, so he has
So
18 of them. And this is what we're literally living
right,
through this
like
right now.
every single thing that you said,
Yeah.
and that's essentially what I did as I found another one that was like nine, elements of fascism and,
Yeah.
went down and okay, that's what they're doing and that's what they're doing and that's what they're doing. And, but yes, every single one of those things, they are tactics that they are using to consolidate and keep power.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have some more specific questions
Yeah.
to drill down a little bit. One is we started to talk before I hit record about your strategic use of all these different platforms, because it you record the Substack lives and you're just prolific with the Substack lives. I have to learn from you about that. But then you redeploy some of those conversations as podcasts and then have some podcasts that are kind of living in its own world. How do you think about these mediums as a way to it's almost like, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that this is our new village square. This is,
Yes.
that this is where we're meeting as neighbors, and you're having these conversations and persuading and informing and edifying, doing all these things. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes, and connecting.
Connecting.
So I don't quite know how it happened. I wasn't doing lives. I was, doing exactly what you're doing now is having conversations that I would later pull some video clips off of and stick on my YouTube shorts and then edit the audio, put that audio on a hosting platform, which would then go out to all of the podcast players. And then and I've been using Substack now for probably almost 3 years because
Okay.
I used it because that was a way to get I was trying to figure out how do I get a newsletter out, and all the ways were hard and expensive and annoying. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, Substack will do it for free.
Right.
Let's do that. Seriously, that was like the big thing. Okay, how it lets you build a base. You can import names, you can, and you can just send it out and it's easy and you don't have to do constant contact, blah, 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 blah. And I did that for a long time. And then I think close to the end of this summer, I realized that, I came across new people on Substack that I hadn't really seen, one of whom is an Ellie Leonard. She is one of the people who is most deeply uh, um, reading the Epstein files. She is investigating the hell out of those, and she is now an expert. And through her, I met this other guy named Nick Perro, and he was trying to create different, like platforms and there started on Substack to be a bunch of different people who would do like a live every day
Mm-hmm.
with, and a lot of it was, just talking about different subjects. And I was like, well, I can't do that. That's just like way too much. Like doing a live every day, that's a little bit much. But then, one of these groups uh, did two a week. And I was like, yeah, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
And it took me a really, really long time from when I started doing a podcast to when I felt comfortable on camera.
Oh,
So, uh, so doing a live at the beginning, like I could barely stand to like put my, a 30-second short up if I was
yeah.
going to be on camera. And I think that's had something to do with like, like younger millennials and Gen Zs are like fine with the camera. They don't care. People don't dress up, like whatever.
Yeah.
But like people our age are like, camera. That means it stays forever.
Yeah.
So I had a process, it took me a long time to get ready even to put up a video of the podcast. So I started doing that, and as technology has changed, it's gotten easier and easier to do a live, have it go out live, have the recording ready to go out basically almost by the time that you're done doing
Yeah.
the live, and then to put together an audio and get it out very soon.
I found it exhilarating. I've only done one. Joe Walsh was kind enough to invite me on his.
Oh,
It's
wow.
funny
I
because
really want to talk to him. So,
oh, he's terrific. Um, he still has a lot of I knowing you a little bit. We spent some time together in DC, and we've
mhm.
gotten to know each other. And I've gotten to know Joe because Joe's been on the show at least 3 or 4 times now. Um, and then we've just stayed in touch. Otherwise, you and he have very different points of view, what I would say on specific pieces of legislation. But the interesting thing that I've come to learn about Joe is that he's also clear on his ultimate priorities and ultimate goals. So, for example, one of the favorite conversations we've ever had on this program is when he and Fred Guttenberg came on together. I mean, talk about being so far apart, just on Second Amendment issues.
Right,
They couldn't be further apart, but they realized that their values are similar. And even though they disagreed on the legislation that they wanted to get there, they wanted to get to the same place. So that's a
right.
good, starting and ending point for them. But you and Joe, I think Joe would be, as well as Helene. Helene would be enamored with you too. But yeah, so I didn't. Anyway, maybe I'll talk offline. I don't want to talk out of school in terms of giving you his like info and all that
No, no,
stuff.
no. But
But what
I'm
I was going to
so
say,
curious about it. Yeah.
sorry, what I was going to say about that is it was exhilarating to be on there, but I noticed that there's all different kinds of engagement because there were people who were engaging in real time while we were talking, and then there was a whole other life to the thing that we were recording, like because Substack breaks it up and sends out shorts automatically, and then sends it up on my YouTube page. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden, there was all of these things happening, like popcorn popping in the in the
Right. And
microwave.
one of the cool things about doing a live um is that there are people in the chat. Like
Yes,
you really do get the opportunity to have a two-way conversation.
yeah.
And as the software has gotten better.
So I have to
So
admit,
yeah.
one of the reasons I haven't done lives myself is
Mhm.
I'm terrified that I'm going to do a live and nobody's going to show up. Just going to be talking to myself. But
Yeah, you know what? I worried about that too. And the first live I did was on somebody else's live.
okay,
And the thing about there is and Joe Walsh is kind of on the fringes of this same group because that I'm a part of because some people are on, they've done a lot of different um lives together. And so
yeah,
it's sort of an amorphous blob where some people are connected to these people and some people are connected to those people. Um, and people show up.
that's great.
At some point, I don't know, middle of the fall, I would be like, I would just, go on because somebody was interesting was on. And in the chat, somebody would be like, "Hi, Stephanie." Like, what? What? What is this? Like, what? You care that I'm on here? Are you kidding me? And, when I hop on some things, there are some people who definitely, and a lot of them are Canadian, actually. It's really interesting.
Oh,
Um,
that's
but
interesting.
yeah, there's a big Canadian community. And, on some of them, the chat is really engaging and people engage within the chat.
Yeah.
I think the ones where the largest one I've been on was, so I do a live on chronic illness. I have a daily chronic migraine, and what this guy Nick Perro and I got in touch with him. He was interested in the democracy group because he wanted to create a network, and uh, and we were talking, and then it came out that we both dealt with chronic illness. So he put together a show on Mondays, 11 o'clock Eastern, on chronic illness. And there are a couple of us who talk about chronic illness. And there's a lot of people who also deal with chronic illness who show up. And we mostly laugh about things and talk about, you know, chronic illnessy things, but also not. And then I do, and Nick does like something every day, if not twice a day or three times a day. He gets pulled into like some of the like the bigger, like Lev Parnas,
Oh, yeah.
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 So he's in this amorphous group. I haven't met him, but he pulls Nick in all the time uh, to be on his, so there's this group that it's not, the big people like Don Lemon.
Yeah.
It's it's somewhere in the middle.
Um,
So yeah, in any case, so that's just sort of how I got into it. And your audience just grows, and the connections I've made, like actual real connections, it's quite fascinating and unbelievable because I didn't used to have that with just a podcast.
so is it self-selecting though?
Yeah.
Meaning the if we really want to reach at least a few degrees outside of a core audience that already thinks along the same lines as we do on a lot of issues, part of my objective is to kind of push that outward a little bit,
Hmm.
not to try to be a martyr and go into in the middle of Trump rallies and try to convert people, in one conversation, nothing like that, but like by a degree.
Hmm.
And I wonder, I just think of some of my friends who did vote for Trump, whether it was once, twice, or three times. Like they do not populate Substack, partly because they don't read the articles. I've
Hmm.
noticed that people on Substack actually read the articles. You know,
Well, there's a tremendous degree of curiosity
yes,
among people on Substack.
yeah.
So one of the things that I firmly believe is that if you're going to get a message out, you have to repeat it with the choir enough times that the choir will repeat it to the people
Oh,
they know.
yeah.
So part of this is, building a choir because people in real life know lots of people. And so so am I going to reach people, MAGA people? No. I mean, I don't even really know any.
What's
Um,
funny is I'll be talking to people, whether it's somebody really close like my brother or people that I come in contact with once a week or once a month or whatever. I'm starting to hear expressions that I repeat over and over and over again, having done whatever 350 of these episodes. And I'm thinking, oh man, it's working. But then I realized that any number of those phrases that I repeat, I probably stole one from David French and another from David Brooks and one from you and one from, one from Lisa Sharon Harper. Just like, so it's, as Pete Seeger once said, they might be, stealing from me, but I'm stealing from everybody.
Well, I just talked to Anon. She's like, Freedom Over Fascism, because she's been doing a messaging guide that she called Freedom Over Fascism. And I will note that I started calling my podcast Freedom Over Fascism first. But
Okay.
I said, she's like, wow, that sounds familiar. I was like, yeah, I stole it from you. She's like, there is no stealing. Like, my
Yeah.
point is to get everybody repeating it.
Yeah.
That's
That's
the
awesome.
whole plan. Yeah.
Well, I can't believe I have so much more we need to do this again because I haven't even gotten into my notes yet. But
Go ahead.
um, a couple things I do want to ask you about, more somewhat topical.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about the 2026 election? And not just the outcome, but the security of the election. How are you feeling about it in general?
Not great. Um, I asked, this has been my question for a lot of recent people that I've talked to is, um, are we going to be able to vote our way out of this? And one person I talked to was like, yeah, sure. But I think the answer is that we have to work really hard on the elections and keeping them free and fair, but it's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So when the Trump regime, after, killing a few people in Minneapolis, then asked for the voting rolls,
Yes.
and in Fulton County in Atlanta went and basically invaded
Yeah.
the to get the votes, my confidence in the security of the election isn't high. But there's more than just national elections, and local and state elections matter a lot too. So will we retake, I don't know. Um, will the 2028 presidential matter? I don't know. But I do know that there's more than just federal elections, and the local and state stuff really matters too.
Yeah, it
So
does. Do you have a sense of the class of candidates that are emerging
for
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 2026?
2026, yeah, I think there are some great people emerging. I mean, your friend Alex
Alex
Vindman just
Vindman, yeah. He's running for
um
Senate. If there is a cycle, and there is a candidate, I'm feeling pretty bullish about Lieutenant Vindman.
yeah.
His brother, they're a fundraising machine. So his brother did really well in that seat in Virginia. And yeah, but listen, it's an uphill climb. Florida is an uphill climb. But also to your point, at the state and local levels, I think there is a lot of activism that is bubbling up. Just even folks coming out to a No Kings rally. Like there are a lot of people who've never done anything like that before,
Right.
you know, that
And then they show
are
up.
used
Right.
to this is what civic engagement looks like,
Hmm.
not just doing a snarky tweet, but like actually going out with your neighbors,
Right.
you
And
know?
seeing people in real life. Yeah, I just talked to Amanda Littman, the head of Run
Oh,
for
right.
Something, the founder.
Yes. Yeah.
They just reached 200. I actually talked to her on the anniversary of their founding, and she didn't mention it. And I didn't know about it. So that was a little bit of a miss on my part. But they had just announced that there are 250,000 people in their pipeline to run for office.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That was a good get. I've been wanting to talk to her for a couple of years. So maybe we'll trade notes. We'll say I'd love to have her on the show. But they're doing some yeoman's work. And by the way, so just I say this all the time. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a liberal. I'm like, in normal times, you and I would be voting very differently. I'm a conservative. I'm a Alex P. Keaton conservative. But
Yeah, but the Overton windows changed
it
so
really has.
I mean, like I don't even, the things that we might vote on, we're so far past those kinds of policy discussions.
Because it's democracy itself.
Right.
I recognized that fairly early on. When Pete Wehner started writing about it in, I think it was June of 2015, his concerns as a conservative, as one of the
Hmm.
speechwriters for George W. Bush, as a conservative Christian, a fundamentalist Christian, that I wasn't concerned quite that early on, but the day after, I think it was August of 2015 when Trump said those things about John McCain, and his poll numbers didn't tank.
Right.
It was the day after that, but within a couple of days, it was clear that didn't hurt him. And then unlike the 2012 cycle, when Michelle Bachmann and Herman Cain and one Looney Tune after another,
Right.
but they all tanked, and Mitt Romney emerged as, whether you like him or not, he was like a legitimate person with
Well, yeah, I mean,
accomplishments. And
I mean, when he was governor here, the whole ACA is modeled after what he did here
after his
in
thing, yeah.
Massachusetts. Yeah.
So I was really concerned in that cycle when his numbers didn't tank. That's when I knew it was. Anyway, all right. So I do have to start wrapping this up. There's so much that we could talk about. Um, I want to ask you the TPNR question, and that is, what do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, and even nurture relationships with people across our differences? So that's people who have different backgrounds and beliefs than we do, who get their news from different sources than we do. How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other, or is it even possible?
I think that we need to be values forward. And so I think a lot of people who talk about politics don't start with their values. I
Mm,
think if we start with our values, there's probably a lot more that we share
yeah.
than 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 we don't. So I would say, really focusing on values and not politics itself.
Okay.
Um, and also leaving room for people to come to different places at there are different rates,
Yeah.
and not, somebody who's coming and saying, yeah, this is really bad, but they voted for Trump 3 times. Okay, this is a different moment. I'm not going to like get on your case for, I mean, I might inside my head for voting for Trump for, I mean, I will judge you, but I will try not to let that show.
Yeah.
Um, is letting people come to their understandings at different speeds and rates and times.
I haven't asked this follow-up question yet, but of the TPNR question, but I want to ask you, and that is there a line somewhere? And if so, so just to illustrate what I'm talking about, I like to I like to leave the exit ramp open for as long as possible, for as many people as possible, with no toll booth. Like you don't have to take a flagellum and
Yeah,
apologize for all your sins. Like, no, if you like come to Jesus and or what you know what I mean? Like that cool, the water's warm, come on in.
right.
But there is a line somewhere. So, for example, somebody asked me, would you have Donald Trump on your show? It made me think. It'd be really great for ratings. Now, I don't know about that because it's not a realistic possibility. But I had in his first, I've had a lot of people from his first administration that were very senior level officials. So, it's not so far out of the realm of possibility to have someone like Stephen Miller on the program. That there is a line somewhere. Stephen Miller is on the other side of that line.
Yes. Stephen Miller's on the other side of that line.
Yeah. So is there a line somewhere? And if so, where is it?
Yeah, I think the people who are very actively dehumanizing
Hmm.
people and treating them with cruelty and having agency over the cruelty that they are inflicting on others is the line for me. Like, I don't think cruel people are people I want to be. I mean, they're people who actively, we're seeing right now people being kidnapped all over the place. If there was like an ICE agent, like, yeah, no, that's the other side of the line for me because
Yeah.
they think that cruelty's okay
Yeah.
and belongs in society. And I disagree with that.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's fair. I think when your whole project is dehumanization, in order to justify cruelty, um, that's yeah, that's the other side of the line. I got to think a lot more about that. You just kind of inspired that. I didn't think of that question until a few things that you said. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I would love to know why you started. Like,
Why are
what
you
got
doing
you?
this?
Why are you, why are you even here? Why are we all here? What? No, but why did you start this? And also, what have what do you feel that you've gotten out of it for yourself?
Oh, that's a different question. Okay, so why did I start it? Um, there are important topics that I wanted to have a structured place to have hard conversations around important topics. So, I think you know this. I grew up in an observant Jewish home, became a Christian in my late 20s. So, having that conversation with my father, or others around, hard issues, why did you come to that decision? And, talking out theology but also politics. One of the things I realized was that we don't know we've forgotten how to do this. because we're spending so much time talking about them, meaning the people who disagree with us, who voted differently than us, and characterizing them, mischaracterizing them. We've spent so much time some of my friends from church basically doing a bad impression of Rush Limbaugh for their whole lives. You know, they want to kill you, and oh, and by the way, buy my book.
Mhm.
So we need to figure out, hey, my neighbor happens to have a different news channel on than what I prefer, but he's still my neighbor.
Mhm.
How about we trade sourdough recipes. So like, can we start there? So that's why I felt like more than any specific issue, we needed to figure out how to live well among each other and get to know each other again. What have I learned? I, it's not, I can't put it in an intellectual way. It's more like,
No, I don't mean it in an intellectual way. I kind of mean it like, how does it fill you up?
so it's kind of like this. It's got when I was any number of skills. Like when I was a kid, I started learning how to play piano, and then all of a sudden, my fingers were moving as if they spoke a language fluently. Right?
Hmm.
When I was fighting, I was doing training in different martial art forms, and then we started sparring, and I was getting my butt kicked. But then all of a sudden, my body started moving and responding because it was speaking a language fluently. Learning from people like David Brooks and Monty Guzman and John Roush and all these wonderful people who know the Braver Angels folks and Liz Joyner, our dear friend at Village Square. I'm learning a vocabulary, but then also it's even harder because I've become aware of a lot of my own proclivities. So it's like mastering those proclivities so that I can lead, as Monty says, lead with curiosity over contentiousness, right? It's
I think that's
training
the key.
myself in
The
that.
key to everything is curiosity
Yeah,
and
yeah.
empathy.
So it's a really good question. Anyway, so lots more to talk about, but I want to make sure that folks can find you, find Freedom Over Fascism. You're doing so much great work. So how can folks find you online and just all the great work that you're doing?
Oh, thank you. Uh, so I am on a bunch of the platforms, but the easiest way to find me is freedomoverfascism.us, and that'll take you to my Substack page. And if you have the means and the interest in supporting me, I would greatly appreciate it. I have a paid subscription. I don't paywall any of my stuff, although I'm considering it.
There
Um,
were a few written articles that were behind the paywall.
of mine.
Yeah. It might have been because I was going pretty deep into the well, but
Maybe. I haven't paywalled anything in a long
okay.
time.
All right.
Um, so yeah,
But worth
uh,
it. Worth it. Totally like,
well, like that's a whole other conversation, but I definitely would, welcome the support. It's really hard to do this when you're doing it all yourself
yeah.
and you're not making any money.
Yeah.
So, uh, so yeah, freedomoverfascism.us. I am also on YouTube at Freedom Over Fascism Pod. Um, those are the two places where I mostly hang out.
Okay. So
I'm on Blue Sky too, but
freedomoverfascism.us and youtube.com/ at freedom over fascism pod.
Pod.
Cool.
Yeah.
We did cover a lot, and we'll do this again. But
Yeah.
is there anything before we
Maybe.
wrap up that we haven't discussed that you'd like to add?
Well, I just would like to extend an invitation to you on one of my lives so that you can experience
Oh dear.
the the community and the just doing this. It is a little bit doing it without a net, but it also
Yeah.
like it's invigorating.
Oh,
So
geez. I was
so
so Joe didn't give me time to get nervous about it because we literally wrapped up a conversation, a recording that we were doing for TPNR, and he's like, "Hey, Core, come on in the dinner." Like literally within an hour or so, I was on his thing.
okay.
I didn't have time. Now I'm nervous, like I got stage fright before But I thank you. That's really kind of you because I know the level of people that you regularly have in conversation on Freedom Over Fascism. So that's awesome. I appreciate that. Stephanie, this
I
was
know what
awesome. I'm so
Thank
glad
you
that.
so much for having me on. It's been really, really great.
Oh, terrific. And you're not going to be able to do the DC thing with TDG, right? Oh,
No, my kid is graduating from high school.
where are your
Same.
priorities? Come on.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Mazel tov.
Thank
Congratulations. But
you.
we will
Thank
miss you
you.
dearly.
Yes, I would
Um,
love to be there, but just not that weekend or
all right.
week.
All right. Another time. So thank you again for doing this. This is really great. I'm so glad we connected, and thanks for moving some things around for me. I know you were making some sacrifices for us, so
Well,
we'll have to,
no problem. It was completely my pleasure. So
and we will circle back around because we have some follow up to do. So
you got
thanks
it.
again. And as always, we'd like to thank Pew Research Center for making today's conversation possible, as well as our dear friends at the Village Square for coming alongside us in this work. If you dig what we're doing here, engage with us on any of the socials. I'm easy to find at Corey S. Nathan. That's Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, at Corey S. Nathan, especially over on Substack, like we're talking about. Don't forget to subscribe over there and join the conversation. Now, go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.